Hello, everyone, and welcome to Orange Audubon's educational webinar on feeding birds and Project Feederwatch. Thank you for joining us. Our mission is to promote public understanding of and interest in wildlife and the environment that supports it. The Cornell Lab's mission is to interpret and conserve the Earth's biological diversity through research, education, and citizen science focused on birds. And the K-12 mission of the Cornell Lab is to create innovative resources and training that build science skills while inspiring young people to connect to local habitats, explore biodiversity, engage in citizen science projects. So you should definitely check out the Cornell Lab of Ornithology K-12 resources. They have a lot of kits, they have free resources, and they do have online and in-person educator training. So the way the Cornell Labs resources work is to engage students, have them explore a topic, and then that leads to inquiry. So why feed birds? You look, here's some different birds eating. There's an oriole eating some grape jelly. There's a cedar waxwing eating a mulberry. There's a hummingbird coming to some nectar. The bottom left is a rose-breasted grosbeak eating some beauty berries. And then there's some birds in the snow feeding at a feeder. Not Florida, of course. So a feeder brings the birds to you and your students, and it's always very exciting. Feeding birds is exciting. It's real world. It's an opportunity to study wild animals. It's low cost. You can do it year round. It does help birds. It sparks kids' curiosity, and it connects them to their local environment. Why pick birds? And birds are everywhere. Once you start talking about birds and starting to really try to observe them, you'll notice them a lot more places than you expect. So there's different kinds of feeders, and I'm going to go through them very quickly, but I will show you on the Project Feederwatch website. They have a lot more details. So if you want to dig into this deeper, you'll have the resources. So you can get a tube feeder. You see the little perches where smaller birds can perch and feed. There's nectar feeders, of course, for birds like hummingbirds. There's suet feeders, cages. There's platform feeders. Those are some of the basic types. And here's some examples. So the blue jay here is on a tube feeder. Here is a northern cardinal on a type of platform feeder. Here's a hummingbird on a nectar feeder. This is a log filled with suet plugs with a woodpecker, and then here's a tray feeder with some juncos. So one thing you need to consider is what kind of seed to use, and you're going to have several options. But if you want the simplest answer, is the most preferred seed for most birds that eat seed is this black oil sunflower seed. It's readily available in many places, and if you want just the most reliable type of seed, just go with that. There are other types of seed. This is safflower, this is corn, this is millet. If you live in Florida, a lot of people like to get millet because painted buntings love it. This is red milo, which birds generally don't eat, so you want to try to avoid seed with this. And this is Niger seed, and there has been issues with Niger seed since COVID, and there was like the supply chain disruption, and a lot of this Niger seed, which needs to be really fresh, got stuck on ships and kind of went stale, and the birds don't like it. So that's one that you might want to steer clear of. There are other options. So if you can't use feeders, if you're doing this on a school campus and you're not allowed to have feeders, you can use native plants. You don't have to have a feeder to do Project Feederwatch. you can have native plants, you can have bird baths and other things that attract birds that you can still count them. So here's a painted bunting, and they love, this is a very easy to grow native plant called Biden's alba, and they love the seeds and they'll come to those. Water, of course, will attract birds too, and there's birds that don't go to feeders that will come to your bird bath to drink and to bathe. So this is a summer tanager, which generally doesn't go to bird feeders. So this is a Project Feederwatch website. There's the website there. And again, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can just pause it and you can get your website. And it's very, very easy to use. So why do this Project Feederwatch project? Because you can put feeders out and not do the project, but I think the project is a very valuable resource, and it's something that makes this more authentic science. So you can engage your students in community science, or now it's called participatory science. You teach students scientific protocols, because this particular project has very specific ways you have to do it, and you encourage inquiry, because as they start seeing birds eat and seeing interactions on birds, they're going to come up with questions, and that can lead to their own inquiry projects. So there's a lot of information on the Project Feederwatch website, and there's many things to look at. I'll go through some of the main features. This is an excellent feature right here. This is a tab where you can look up food and feeder preferences for common birds that you might want to attract to your location. So when you click on it, you're going to see something that looks like this. Now, if you particularly want to look up a specific bird that your students really want to see, you can type it in. Now, I would preset it to your location, because this has birds of North America. So there'll be a lot of things that if you live in the Southeast, for example, if you have it set for all of North America, there's things that you're not going to see that would be in this. So I would set it for your area, and you can filter by, like if you just want to use that black oil sunflower seeds, you can filter it so that you're only going to pull up birds that'll come to that. You can also filter by the feeder type. So if you only want to use like a tube feeder, that's fine. You can filter it for tube feeder, for black oil sunflower seed, and then the Southeast, and then you click on those and it'll come up with the birds that you could attract. Another way, let's say your students want to see a Baltimore Oriole. So one way to try to encourage that is you can look up the specific bird, and it will tell you where they winter, because this is Project Feederwatch, which is a winter project. It runs from, well, it's winter and spring. It runs from November 1st to mid-April. So this doesn't cover summer birds at all. And so here it tells you that the Baltimore Oriole will come to suet, it'll come to sugar water, and it'll come to fruit, and that you could either use a platform feeder or a nectar feeder, which is very interesting. So this is not a seed-eating bird. If you can't buy feeders, your students can make them. There's lots of resources online. This is one made out of a recycled soda bottle. Here's a simple one you can do using pine cones and peanut butter and roll it in seed. Now, I will caution you on this one. It's super easy for squirrels to get a hold of that and take the whole cone down and eat it. So unless you have a way you can kind of put it on a branch where the squirrels can't get it, it probably won't last long. But feeders are pretty inexpensive. So something you want to consider when you're putting up feeders is you don't want the feeder too far away from windows. Now, this may not make sense to you. If the feeder is close to the window, and well, there's some things you can do here. What the danger is, you can have birds on a feeder, and a bird of prey or another predator comes along. They will spook, and they'll get scared, and they will just fly. And if you don't have anything on your windows that helps them to see that it's a window and not just empty space, they will crash into your windows, and that is usually deadly to birds. So to avoid that, there's a couple things you can do. You can do some window treatments as simple as using things like window markers, and you put dots 2 inches apart on the windows that face the feeder, and then the birds can see it. There's actual commercial products you can buy. I've used them on my windows that peel off, and the dots are already on there, and they really don't really mess up your window. You can still see out your window. It looks fine from the street. It looks fine, and it prevents the bird strikes. The other things that are recommended, you can have your feeder less than a meter from your window, and then the birds can't build up speed and hurt themselves if they get spooked. So that's another option. And window feeders that stick to the window, they're not a problem. The birds just come to that and they don't crash. What about squirrels? Because most of us deal with squirrels, gray squirrels probably. So there are things you can do. You can use, and these you can buy easily or make, a baffle, which goes below the feeder, or it can be above the feeder, and it keeps the squirrels from climbing on it. Another thing, if you have trees or a roof, so this kind of contradictory about keeping a certain distance from, because if you have your feeder like 1 meter from your building, then yeah, the squirrels can climb up the building and jump on the feeder. So it's kind of a double-edged sword that you have to kind of consider. But if you have trees around, you don't want your feeders any closer than about 10 feet, because squirrels are very athletic and they can jump. Or you can just live with the squirrels, because you can do that too. Right, there's valuable information on the Project Feederwatch website under the community tab, and it gives you see photos, there's common questions, there's tips, and there's a camera. So that's another option. If you can't do them at your school, you can still watch a camera, and I'll show you that in a few minutes. This is from one of the blogs, from tips from a participant on how they outsmarted squirrels. So it showed like using a bungee cord, and people have come up with all kinds of ingenious ways to trick the squirrels. And that's another thing that your students might get really interested in about squirrels and how to keep them off feeders. So when should you feed birds? Well, you can feed birds all year, but definitely in the winter time is when birds need the food the most, because especially if you're up north, there's less food available, but you can feed them all year, it's fine. Feeding birds will create opportunities for inquiry. So here's a school, and here's where they set their feeders, and they didn't see any birds. And that's okay, because that leads to questions on, why are there no birds here? And for that particular school, that led to a whole thing about habitat and what birds need. And they discovered a lot of things that they were doing that birds didn't particularly care for. Here's another situation. And if you look at this picture, you can see there's a reason why birds are not coming to that feeder. There's a bird of prey there. And so that happens. Birds of prey kind of figure out that feeders are places they can go eat too. So if that happens, you can talk to your students, and hopefully they will come up with the idea that maybe we should take down the feeders for a little while until this bird of prey decides to find a new place to go hunting. And they will. And I know that from personal experience, because that's my feeder. And I had a hawk come, and I just had my feeders down until it decided to go somewhere else. So important thing to talk to your students about, if you recall that slide a few slides ago where they had feeders like right next to their window and there was nothing around the feeders. So birds need a habitat where their feeders are located. So teach your students habitat is a place where organisms live, and it's made of 4 components. Needs to have food, needs to have water nearby, needs to have cover. And that's what was missing at the one school, and it needs some space. So a lot of times people put feeders out and they don't provide cover, bushes, trees, because the birds need somewhere to hide in between feeding. Or if a predator comes up, they need a place to quickly get away. So consider that when you're planning feeding. So ask your students, is the city a habitat? Well, you got a little idea there by seeing the pigeons. So does it have food, water, cover, and space? Yeah, if it does, then it's a habitat. Now, it might not be a habitat for a great variety of birds, but there will be birds that can live in the city as long as they can find those components. So ask your students, here is a school garden. Can this be a habitat? Ask them, does it have food, water, cover, and space? And it does. So that could be a habitat for birds. So here's something to consider doing before you put feeders up. Create a list to plan where to place your feeders. And the students can plan this out. And you can look what's already existing on your campus. Do you have some native plants that have berries or seeds? Are there insects around the native plants? Is there bushes and trees for cover? Is there places where water gathers? And is there space around for the birds to fly? You can even get, more complex and create a habitat mat using, a drawing program on the computer, or the students can draw them out. And they can draw it like this. And they get really excited when they start to plan these things. And then you can take their plans and then kind of help them to see things that are realistic, because maybe they want to put a river through your schoolyard, and that might not work out quite the way you want to. So, you can tell them, well, what are some things that we can do, like a bird bath? And then put your plans into action. Have the students actually work. You might want to do like a beautification day, or if you have a nature club, they can take several meetings and they can do it a little bit at a time. So to do feeder watch, once you have a habitat for birds to feed at, whether you have native plants or you're putting feeders out, what you need to do is decide where you're going to count. And you're going to count the birds that visit 2 days in a row, and you enter that data online. Okay, you choose your count days. It's going to run from November 1st through April 30th. For each count site, select 2 consecutive days, once a week. You don't have to do it every week. Some people do it once a month. Some people do it once every other month. It depends on your schedule. But you can do it every week if you'd like. If you can't identify a bird, there's help on the website. It's there where it says learn, and it has a little, you click on that, then it has identifying birds and common feeding birds. So that will help you. There's a lot of reports on this website. So there's one for the top 25 birds in different areas, which is really interesting. So you have older students, it's fun to look at this. You click on that, then you can choose a season. So you can even have groups of students look at different seasons. And you pick a region of North America, and then you put in your specific state or province. And then when you select that, it's going to generate a list of the most common birds in your area. So I did it for Florida, and you can see here's the top 10: northern cardinal, mourning dove, red-bellied woodpecker, so on and so forth. Very interesting. There's information here about feeders. So if you want to really take a look and even have students research feeders, that's where you look. And here, there's different feeder types. Okay, there's different feeder types. There's ground feeders, hopper feeders, large tube feeders. So you can look for more information on that. And you can look up the different kinds of food and get specific information on different types of food. And there's some important information about taking care of your feeders, because if you don't clean them regularly, birds can get sick. So be sure you check that out. It's not very hard. So our next webinar will be December 11th. And as we're getting ready for the Christmas bird count season, we're going to do a program on counting birds for science. So I hope you can join us. And here's our email, education@orangeaudubonfl.org. And if you want to get on the list to get the Zoom link for these programs to watch them live, email me. And so thank you for joining. If you want a certificate of completion and you're watching this on YouTube, all you need to do is email me and give me a summary of what you learned, and I can provide you a certificate. So thank you again for joining us, and I hope that you have a great time feeding birds at your school or your home. Thank you so much.